Okay.
Right.
Everybody, thank you for this opportunity to meet with some teachers from across our glorious country. My name is Matt Sauer. I work in Calgary Catholic, and actually Nancy and I worked together. Our friendship blossomed working together at a high school, and been blessed to work alongside her for a number of years, and we're in different roles within our district now, but still very good friends, and still, you know, pick each other's brains as we go through. If you could go to the next slide, please. I'm born and raised in Calgary. My father's German. My last name may suggest that. And my mom is from Trinidad. She was born and raised in Trinidad. My father was actually from Calgary as well as my grandfather from just outside. And so I'm a Trini German, and the only other Trini German I've ever met is my sister. And growing up in Calgary, I always got a question, right, of what's your deal? Like, what are you? People were honestly in that asking why I wasn't white, to be very frank, and what because I would always answer with, I'm half German, and that never satisfied the question, and so people wanted to know about this Trini piece. My mother is born and raised in Trinidad, and she my family was brought over as indentured laborers, and eventually moved to the entire family eventually moved to Calgary. My name is Matthew Tyler John Sauer, or Sauer, and when people see my name and then see me, they're confused oftentimes. Names, I've always felt, are super important and powerful, and they're things that we overlook. We often overlook names, truthfully, within our classrooms, within our students. We just, you know, a name is merely something to identify a kid by, and for attendance. In my class, I'm very intentional with names. I want kids to understand their name. I want to understand their name. Through their names, I want to know their story. Names are so important for our identity. I start all of my classes the first 2 to 3 days, and I'm a high school English teacher. I spent the first 2 to 3 days of every class trying to get know my students through their names. I'll look at their name and ask and try and guess where they're from, where their family is from. I'll try and draw out their stories. And this simple practice immediately breaks down so many barriers and walls within my classroom, because right from jump, just based off of the attendance sheet, I'm really getting to know who these kids are, and they're getting to know who they are. So many times I'll have a kid say, I don't know, I have no idea. And so they got homework. Go ask your parents. And it's amazing, that simple activity, it sounds so simple, brings in the parents into the classroom now. Now the parents are engaged with some dialogue with their kid about already what's happening in class, which doesn't happen often in high school English. I'm very intentional about doing this, because if I'm able to do this, the curriculum is so easy for me, because we're able to build relationships with our kids, because we know that's what this is all about. If I could go to the next slide, please. I ask my kids, who are you from? Not where are you from, but who are you from? I want to go beyond a place. I want them to look into their family story. I want them to reflect on their identity. I want them to understand their level of sense and their own sense and understanding of self through asking, who are you from? And I got this activity from a magazine that some people may be familiar with. And if not, I encourage you to just Google and check out their website, and they're called Living Hyphen. A Living Hyphen is a magazine published across the country. They have podcasts you can check out, and magazines. The magazines are brilliant, and they're written by Canadians who live within hyphenated spaces. Myself, betwixt and between two worlds. And so many of our kids are caught between two worlds, whether it's racially or based on their sexual identity or based on their religion. They're caught between two worlds. and identifying this betwixt and between, this living hyphen through an activity of who are you from is so empowering and enriching, and really helps with the rest of whatever class is about. If I could go to the next slide, please. My project that I wanted to speak about mostly today is called Voices from the Margins. We really work with marginalization in my grade 10 class, and I truthfully believe you can do this in any grade level. You just got to obviously age appropriate. But talking about marginalized peoples, I have a policy in my class, or I don't know, framework. It says actually on my course outline, #NDWG, no dead white guys. As Nancy had commented on, a lot of the literature we expose, that we read and we teach about are from the perspective of dead white males, and that's nothing against dead white males. I know my students have got a lot of literature and exposure to the writings of dead white males, and so my focus is to give them a diversity of perspectives in my class. And so we focus on, in grade 10, margins. We talk about what it means to be marginalized, and we brainstorm and whatnot. If we could go to the next slide. I frame my class on these marginalized groups. I do that because honestly, I have a library of literature that is written from, or created from, sorry, the perspective of these marginalized groups. That is, the authors or the creators or the artists or the poets or the directors are of these communities, because I want to know their story. I have in other categories you see as well, because there are other marginalized groups. So we talk about this, and I've included youth as a marginalized group in here because at times youth is marginalized. Their voices are minimized. They're not as important. What they say is not as of the same value. And it's so important for me to include youth, because if I include youth, I'm 100% speaking to everybody in my room. My project is now inclusive. Truthfully, everybody can connect on some level of when they've been marginalized or they know somebody who's been marginalized. And so if I can connect with them, well, then the work becomes easier. If I could go to the next slide, please. What I've done is I have a list, and I've shared this will be shared with you after. I have a list from these 6 genres, and I have, for every one of these genres, I have a piece of literature that represents that marginalized group. So I have a fiction piece, a poem, a film, nonfiction, art and visuals, and song from an Indigenous perspective, and so on and so forth for every. And what I ask my kids to do is to build their own syllabus. I've got 6 of these categories, and I've got 8 marginalized groups. I have 48 texts that I give to them. They have to pick just one text from every marginalized group. Therefore, they're looking through the eyes and the lens of a different marginalized group, and they also have to ensure that they select every genre. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to empower those kids, right? To take ownership of the literature that they choose. And in doing that, well, they become more bought in. If we could go to the next slide. My entire grade 10 novel project is a project that is centered on marginalized voices. These are some of the novels that I've chosen. It's an independent novel study. All of these novels, truthfully, sit on my own. I have an issue. I buy a lot of books. I'm an English teacher. I own all of these books. I bring them from my home. I don't care what the school has available. I'm done using that as an excuse, because I used that as an excuse earlier in my career. I bring about 60 novels to the class, and the kids select their novel. Again, it works within the project. So it's the fiction piece of the project, and that's insert the marginalized voice that they pick. If I could go to the next slide, please. What they do with that is I give them a series of questions and things I want them to look for: tone, voice, the very English literary things, but I also want them to compare voices, How does somebody from the LGBTQ community, as manifested in the spoken word poem, how are their struggles similar and different to somebody that's a visible minority as manifested in this TED Talk? And what are the connections from the homeless community, with the homeless poetry that I've provided for them, from poetry written by people from the homeless community? And so we're trying to draw connections through it. If you could go to the next slide. This is what I have them do with it. Because I have 8 texts, I want them to respond in 4 different ways. Staying true to my curriculum and all the things that I have to do there. They respond critically, written. They respond creatively, at least 1 prose, 1 poem. They respond visually, whether that's artwork, photography, creating an Instagram account, a Visco account, I don't care. Visuals, let visuals do the talking. And then orally. And again, they create podcasts, MP3s, they make videos. Some of them, this is crazy to me because I did not see this coming. A significant number of the kids interview or are interviewed by their parents. And I paused there because I didn't see that coming. And I cannot tell you how powerful it is for me to see a parent interviewing or being interviewed by their kid about a marginalized voice that neither one of them have any personal or lived experience connection with. Being able to connect with home is important. And this project just does it, because these conversations are not just literature that sit in a classroom. It extends way beyond. I firmly believe you can do this in all grades. It's just a matter of the literature and how you frame it. But if kids at younger ages, if they're taking ownership and selecting the books, they get excited. You should see when the kids come in for that novel, because you only get 1 day. And they pick that novel and they rock, paper, scissors, and they argue and they fight and they want a book. It's exciting. And when they're building their syllabus, it's pretty cool just to watch them, take a look at this TED Talk or this podcast and be like, nah, it's not for me. So while I've asked them to do work on 8, they've actually, honestly, they take a look at 15. I don't know the number, but you get it, more than what's required of them, being exposed and introduced to more voices. The next slide, please. What I do is I ask all of my students to put this on a website. Now, we're not going to go and look at the websites now, but you will have access. I've gotten permission from these 3 students to share their websites with you. All of their work they put on a website. I think it's an important skill to learn how to create a website. And it's my daughter's in grade 4, and she does it. It looks like a grade 4 kid, but she's playing with it too. Like they know a lot more than we do. So let them do it. They put all of their work on a website. It's beautiful because at the end, all they handed is a URL to me, just a link. I don't have 75 pieces of paper that I'm going to lose or not lose. I don't have I handed them all in, but I only have 7 of the response. It's all on this website. And it's a takeaway for the kids. They have this website for the rest of their lives, whether they want it or not, but it's a cool takeaway for them. So before I do any of my projects, give any of my kids my projects, I do the project myself. I think it's important when we're doing project-based learning to do the projects before your kids. It's not just an idea for me. If I think it's that great of an idea, I want to go through it. And in going through it, I see the pitfalls. I make changes as I go along. I see the roadblocks. I can help answer questions because I had those same questions in doing the project myself. And it's a pretty cool experience for me to have my own website of the text that I've built and going through these with these projects. So at the end here, before I pass it on to Kevin, I've included the project itself, a list of all of the texts that I use, and I would love if anybody was interested to reach out and so we could chat and I could hear some different texts to throw in there. I want to network in community and build a community as much as possible with teachers. So thank you.